The AAR 6-barrel Cuda is another one of those cars in exactly the same boat for me as the Chevy El Camino. It's already a premium, it's already a HD car, it's already got visual upgrades, it's a relatively recent newcomer to Gran Turismo, all of the right things are there for it to still be included, and yet for whatever reason it isn't. And that of course is the whole point of going back and re-reviewing these cars, because these are the ones which I do think have a good chance of coming back in future. Now some definitely more than others, but I could certainly see this car having a pretty good chance of coming back. And although it would make sense to have it alongside something like maybe the El Camino and maybe something else American as well, making sense doesn't necessarily mean that Polyphony will do that. Now this particular version of the Cuda, on paper at least, actually doesn't sound that impressive. It's only rated at about 289 horsepower, even the torque isn't all that high at 345 foot-pounds, it's just under 1600 kilos, which, although that sounds lightweight for an American car, it's not that crazy. It's still a 1.6 ton machine. The price tag isn't overly cheap at 110 grand, and even the engine itself, well, it's a 5.6 litre, so in American money a 340 cubic inch, and although it looks the part with some flashy colours and interesting aero, it just doesn't really look like the visuals match up to the performance, at least on paper. There are a couple of things to bear in mind though about the 6-barrel. Number one, this is essentially a homologation car. It was an SCCA style racing machine, and apparently some of the visual mods which they did to this, such as the front and rear spoilers, etc., and some lighter weight parts as well, so apparently what they did was fit it to the production version, because then it in effect allowed them to shove it on the race car and still have that plausible deniability of, well, it does match the road version, which is quite a cool idea, and I'm sure that comes up quite a lot in homologation. Now on the one hand, that does explain the price. Being a more expensive version makes sense when it is race derived, but it still doesn't explain why it doesn't sound that impressive. It has like a hot hatch level of power, and we're used to having like 350 horses at least out of most muscle cars. It feels like 450 in some cases, and of course, although we don't have them in the game, in real life you had some crazy race or drag derived stuff from various brands like the 540 horsepower Camaro ZL1s. This one apparently could be one of those occasions like Japanese vehicles where it was a little bit better than the numbers actually suggested, at least from a dealership. Could that have been a tricky way of trying to get around the rules again? Well, maybe. I don't know how common of a practice that was, but it seems fairly common in America and Japan. America back in the day, Japan fairly recently, if not still. I'm not sure if they do that anymore or even have any reason to, but in practice, thankfully the car more than makes up for any disadvantage on paper, because even though it doesn't have a huge amount of power, that is a double-edged sword. It's the negative of not being as ballistic in a straight line as you'd expect a muscle car to be, but the payoff is not only is it easier for beginners to use because you don't really have much torque and horsepower to put down, but it also means you can build up the car without going crazy on points, unless you really do want to pour a load of cash into horsepower, torque and straight line ability. That's a good advantage to have, because if you think about it, this is essentially like a riff on the idea of a muscle car already having straight line performance. Just focus on the handling, the cornering, the braking, and then the speed takes care of itself. This vehicle is essentially that kind of approach, and I'm kind of disappointed in myself for not loving this car more, because I do really like the Cuda. I love the Cuda 440 in particular, which of course is the non-premium, which has been in Gran Turismo for a while, a lot longer than this one was, and yet this one just never really appealed to me. I'm a Cuda fan. I like the older versions from the mid to late 60s. I love the 440, as I said, but this one, for whatever reason, maybe the lack of power, it just didn't end up in my regular rotation in Gran Turismo 6. In a funny kind of way though, I do feel that this car almost could have more of a chance of coming back because of those specs, because of its history, because of its race-derived approach to everything, from its visuals to its performance to its engine. It has the lighter weight block, etc. That's kind of perfect, because really that sounds like exactly the kind of car which Kaz would want to bring back. This road-going vehicle, but with motorsport roots and motorsport purpose. It would make perfect sense to bring it back. And it's not like Gran Turismo has a huge amount of classic pony cars, muscle cars, or even American classics in general. There are some, and there are some which are very iconic, but not as many as we used to have, and there are some notable ones which are left out, like some of the variations of the Pontiac GTO or the Tempest Le Mans, that kind of stuff. Or alternately, when it comes to brands like Buick or here with Plymouth, you've got one or two in different games, but not as many of us would probably like. As far as when this could happen, or if, really, obviously the if is always up in the air, but I would see this more as maybe a Gran Turismo 8, if you will, kind of car. Not for any particular reason other than we just didn't see it in the leaked list. And obviously that doesn't mean everything. We've seen plenty of cars which weren't, but I do feel like this is one of those cars that probably would have appeared there, and unless I'm remembering wrong, I don't think it was. We did have some other classic American stuff in there, like the old school Corvette, we had the Chevy Chevelle, but this one wasn't included. And even though they're not making that great use misuse of that Plymouth license, it does at least leave the door more open, I would say, than brands like Buick, which aren't there at all anymore. Although Buick is technically set for a return, going back to that data mining list, because the GNX was a part of that list. Which is curious because you've got that vehicle, which is a fan favourite, but was never a premium, which is supposed to be coming back, and then you've got this, which is motorsport derived, was already a premium, much like the El Camino, and yet no evidence to suggest that it's going to come anytime soon. It's kind of weird how Polyphony often does the exact opposite of what you'd expect them to do in certain situations. That's it for this brief return to the AAR Cuda, the All-American Racers 6-barrel version of the Cuda with that 340 engine. I'm sure this vehicle has plenty of fans, even within GT6, let alone in real life. Surprisingly, for an American classic and muscle fan such as myself, it just happens to be one of the ones that I wasn't as interested in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it down below though. Of course, I'll see you in future with more GT6 re-reviews, and thanks for watching.